Okay, hey everybody. So today I have with me Dave Marcus, and this is going to be a really interesting conversation. He is actually the husband of, I don't know if you watched the video that we did with Susanna Ludwig. It was about a month ago, and it was her perspective on, she met her life partner on Coffee Meets Bagel, and we all love to hear a success story. So now we're going to hear Dave's perspective dating as a man on dating apps and how he handled it and how he ended up meeting Susanna. So thanks for coming on, Dave. This is Dave Marcus. I didn't say that already. So we have a few talking points, but one is that, you told me on our conversation on the phone that you liked to have certain guidelines that you set, kind of parameters for each date that you kind of learned made you feel more comfortable with dating. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. And again, these are just what work for me. And so I'm not saying anybody else will think they're even logical or sane, but I'll go through them anyway.
Okay.
First of all, I want to just mention the framework. And like Susanna in many ways, and I enjoyed her conversation with you, but we do differ in some things. We agree on one thing: dating can be fun. The framework, the way you look at it is important. I love hearing people's stories, and I think all of us who like to watch Sex and the City or Succession or Ted Lasso, we want to know about human nature. We want to know about why people do things and what they've done and how they relate with their families and friends. And so I approach dating after divorce as a big sociological experiment, if you will. I want to hear about people. And I set my expectations low. I figured that I would meet somebody, but it would take many, many, many dates. And it did. And I'm not saying I'm such a great catch. I'm just telling you that divorce does teach you to be really, really careful. And when you have kids, means you have to watch out not just for yourself, but for the interest of younger people too.
Right.
We can certainly talk about some mistakes I've made, because I do make some. But given that I wanted to sort of approach it as a storytelling, story listening time, I had this approach that Susanna would not agree with at all, which is, I would say, when I met a woman on the phone, because we were introduced online, because we found each other, I would say very clearly that my idea was not to have too many calls or too many texts, because there is a blink sense, a sense that you need to meet somebody in person. And I'm sure it's much more difficult in the pandemic, but it still can be done outdoors at a distance. And to have eye-to-eye contact, to have body language, it's not the same in photos and texts and emails and so forth. So I kept those to a minimum. And then I would say, I'd like to meet you for 25 minutes for coffee. We can then decide, if we want to meet again sometime. We'll go our separate ways and let each other know. And generally, I got a good reception to that, but there were a couple of times when someone said, you're so important, you're too busy like, I have kids, like my kids are my priority. And when I was single, I wanted to have a bunch of dates, but not do a dinner date or a lunch date first. I just never, ever, ever did.
Yeah. Well, and I like that, because I'm sure some women were really appreciative that it was very clear, there was like very clear, what was going to happen on the date. And then I'm sure some people just said, forget it. I'm not interested. Is that basically, yes, you kind of weeded out people in that way, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just sort of, you're looking for somebody who's compatible with you. I'm not always right. But there are certain things that I felt were important, to respect their time and respect my time. I did have a woman who drove 3 hours to see me. She claimed she was coming up for a job interview to where I lived at the time. And then I said, okay, 25 minutes is over. After we had 25 minutes of coffee, she was nice, but we were just different. And she started screaming at me in the coffee place, like, you're too good for me. You only had 25 minutes. I said, well, I told you that. I said, you said you were coming up here for a job interview anyway. I just made that up. I was coming to see you. You can't win sometimes. And there's always gonna be those people for sure. That's interesting. And you wonder how many people actually, make up excuses as to why they're suddenly have to be in the city and, yeah, sure, I can meet you. I'm going to be in the city anyway, or wherever you're going. I'm sure that happens all the time. But when you only have 25 minutes, that's interesting. So, and then
So then were those your only parameters? It was the 25 minutes and then after that, if you were both interested, what would happen from there?
Then we would just agree to try to meet again for, for more of a coffee or a lunch or dinner. But maybe some follow-up conversations, but I just felt that I could tell a lot, and I'm sure, many women met me and said, no way, I don't want you. I mean, you want parameters, if you want things like, to me, I think women are always interested in cracking the guy code, right? What are we all about? What are we doing? And women who date women, same thing, men need to know too. So for me, the most important thing I think is that, and I can say this as a man who has, boys, children, and who has male buddies, men don't listen. And so if I could say anything to guys out there, I would say, just stop boasting, stop talking about yourself and listen. I know I'm not doing that, but this is a podcast. I'm allowed to break the rule. And I would say to women, it's okay to say in your profile or in a note, I like men who listen, not just on the first date, not just on the first conversations, but always, because that's the biggest complaint. That's one of the biggest complaints I hear from women. And you see,
yeah, no, I hear that. I hear that all the time, and not just in person too. It's even just in messaging. Messaging back and forth. Women are always really, between a man and a woman conversation, they get very frustrated because they feel like they're carrying the conversation, and the man isn't asking questions in return. Like they'll answer them, and then they won't ask something else. So then the conversation falls flat. And it's like that in person too. If you just have one person talking about themselves and not asking you anything else, then you're just listening to that person, and that happens all the time. And actually, I just want to point out that there was very few dates that I went on with men that they didn't do that, for sure. And one of the reasons that I kept going out with my partner, and I don't know if you heard that story, that it took me 4 dates before I actually liked him in a romantic way. But what I liked about him is that he actually listened. He asked me about myself, we had conversation back and forth, but he really did listen, and that was huge. And even if we were just going to be friends, that's something that you want in a friend too. So I think that is so important. And I hope any men watching this take your advice on that.
That's one word, listen. But what you mean by that is listen actively, listen deeply.
Yeah.
And
yes.
When someone says something, take it in and think about it, and don't just dismiss it.
Right.
You can learn, you can be persuaded. I met a couple of women who initially I wasn't sure about 25 minutes, and then I would go out with them later, and ultimately it didn't work out, but we did become friends, and that was nice for me, and I value that. But yeah. I did try to listen.
Right. No, that's great. I'm sure that was, it's a big deal for women if they go out with somebody that actually listens and as you said, listens actively. So tell me, you were telling me also in our conversation that the difference between TMI versus being open and honest, and kind of when to share certain things, like, for example, about your divorce or something about your child or whatever it is, when to share those things and when it's too soon. So tell us your opinion on that.
So I actually wrote myself a few notes, excuse me for looking at them, but these are kind of things that I've told friends, and I'll start with the don'ts. So I always say to my buddies, when you're meeting somebody, have talks about TV shows you like and travels and values and all those things, but don't talk about your kids. Don't talk about your ex. Don't talk about your accomplishments. The first date. Just have some general things. Just see if there's any kind of clicking at all. Because what so often happens to me, and I'll say this because you have women listening. I would have a first date or first conversation on the phone with a woman, and she would go on this tirade about her ex. Now, we all have exes. I mean, many of the people you work with have exes.
Yeah.
We all have stories about them, but that can wait. And your children's great accomplishments. I had a woman tell me about how brilliant her daughter was and so forth. First 5 minutes, first date, not the most important. I'm happy for you. Not the most, not to conceal, not to pretend you don't have kids, but I would deflect. Tell me about your kids. Well, let's talk about you first. Let's talk about what we do first. We'll talk about that another time. I love my 3 kids. I could talk about them at length, but it's not my purpose to talk about them in initial dates.
Right. No, that's a big, that's a great tip actually, because I think a lot of people do default to, to talking about their kids or their grandkids or whatever. And I do hear from the other side of things like, oh, he just went on and on about his grandchildren, or he went on. So yeah, it can get
Well,
a little.
my first date was at a coffee place, a well-known coffee chain, and in one of my first dates, and I still remember it. I still can envision it because I passed a coffee place the other day, and the woman sat there and talked about how she was sharing her house in different wings, different parts of the house with her soon-to-be ex-husband. They're still negotiating about divorce, but they couldn't get the house. Like, I didn't need to, I understand that's important to her, but I didn't need to know that. Also, I should mention her profile online did say she was divorced. She's not divorced. She was in the process of divorce. So
Right.
that's a no-no too. I see that all the time. And my woman friends say all the time that men lie. Your height is your height. Your divorce, your marital status, your marital status. Don't start off with that. First, like, I only would introduce myself by my first name. I only would meet in a public place. But it's very easy these days with certain sites to Google somebody and figure out what they're all about. And
Yeah.
you start with a lie, then it's over. I had a woman tell me she was a certain religion and she was not that religion. I found out later.
Okay.
And that was, religion to me is not the most important thing, but honesty and transparency is.
Right. Exactly. That's so true. Yeah, and I learned that pretty fast too, going out on my first few dates and oversharing about my terrible divorce I was going through, and kind of realized like no one really wants to hear about that. Even if they're interested, they're pretending. So, but yeah. So I want to hear about how you met Susanna, but first how many years, I guess, in total were you online dating?
It took me several years. I can't say that, I was like this, the most wanted bachelor or anything like that. Like, and I think if you have 3 kids, women are rightfully, and you're divorced, women are rightfully like, I don't know. And my kids were, one of them was fairly young then. And let's just make a hypothetical. Perhaps I know somebody who was married to a woman who sued him for $25 million. Perhaps I know somebody who was married to a woman who took her children and him to Child Protective Services. This is just hypothetical. I'm not.
Right.
So
yeah. For example.
Let's say we all have complications in our backgrounds in our lives.
Yeah.
So now I'll talk about me. When I met Susanna, I met her online and we really clicked online. And we used a site that told us we had a few friends in common, actually. And that, I really like that. That harkens back to the old days of dating, the old village days, right? Somebody's aunt knows the woman or the man or the whatever. And I really liked that because there's a lot of people out there who are not what their profiles say, in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And so we had that. Then we had a great conversation on the phone, as I recall. Then we had our 25-minute date, which stretched, as she told you, to 2 hours for coffee.
Right. So I want to just I want to just point that out to people. So his 25-minute rule was bent very much so when he met Susanna, which I love. So you obviously.
I lived in Mexico. I lived in South America. So time is fungible. Like you can sometimes there's very social countries I lived in. So you go late to dinner, you stay late to dinner. So the 25 minutes was expanded, and that was a breaking of my rule. But I really clicked with her. I really liked her. And then when I left the coffee, I called this person we had in common, this guy who was a journalist like me. And I said, hey, what do you think of Susanna Ludwig? He said, oh, she's fantastic. I did my due diligence the way you do. And I trusted his judgment. He had known her from a work project. And that was really magical. I liked her because the things I would tell you about a profile, the things I'd tell you about a person are really important to me, and I found them in Susanna. So I always tell my women friends who are writing profiles, keep it short and succinct. Don't boast, don't talk too much about yourself. I would say use specifics, like I did in my profile too. I said in mine, I drive a Prius. So if that's how you drive a Prius versus I drive a Range Rover, so much more about me than. And then I made a joke because I think humor is important. I made a joke that I spent alternate Mondays, separating the cans and the bottles and recycling or something like that. It was just to get attention. It was also it was sort of a meme to poke fun at men who can't stop telling you how important and how illustrious and how well traveled they are. So I just poke
Right.
fun at myself and
Yes.
stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
That
So
just,
I also want to point that out to people that you, first of all, for you, it was really important that you were upfront about, that you weren't, the Hamptons guy that was going to have like 3 BMWs and, the Hummer, I think you mentioned. And so that was, I love that, because I think that people, it's very clear to people what, the type of person you are. The fact that you would mention that, first of all, and that you felt really strongly that you wanted to put that out there. So that's something really important, I think, for people to know, that you can put something out there about yourself in a funny way, and which is what you did. You used a lot of humor in your profile, in your bio, which I really loved. And I know that doesn't come easy for everyone, but even just like a little, self-deprecating comment or something, just in a humorous way, no, don't go crazy. But I think that's really goes a long way. I think people really are more drawn to that. So
I said for men and from one woman, I'll repeat that because I wrote down these 3 points that I always tell my friends. One thing is in the profile, and when you first meet somebody, understatement. Don't boast. Keep it short. A few words is a lot. Number 2, sense of humor really helps. We're all in tough times these days. We've had friends who've been sick, kids who've been kept out of school, whatever their situation, elderly parents who are suffering. So humor really goes a long way. Self-deprecating humor, not humor aimed at groups or other people. And then specifics, the Prius versus a Range Rover, the I volunteer on Saturdays versus I always go surfing in the Turks and Caicos. Like, it's just,
right.
one's right or one's wrong. I have a lot of wealthy friends and more power to them, but a little bit of a detail will tell you something about people. So those 3 things are important, I think, because like, to me, a good profile, like a good first conversation, specifics tell a larger story. You don't need to say so much about yourself. If you mention where you vacation or what you drive or what you read or what you watch, you get it. It's sending symbols, and they should be honest symbols. I was a journalist overseas for a long time. I'm not wealthy. I am who I am. And several of the women I met were like, they were looking for money, and I do understand that they had spouses or partners who were not good providers, who didn't work, who didn't hold jobs, all those things. They had kids, they had elderly parents, they had money. That's fine, but they weren't going to get it from me.
Right. And you were very clear about that. You weren't misleading anybody. Yeah, which is.
And I had a relative who had a very, very wonderful house, speaking of the Hamptons, out there. And I was very careful not to mention it, not to take anybody there for a few dates. And I did take one woman there. She just decided that I was very wealthy, and she had the wrong impression about me, unfortunately, because it was not my house, not my money, not my place to sell when it sold.
Right.
But I think it's, like you and we could talk forever about. I learned in marriage that previously that I think it is important to share values, to share sort of an idea about parenting if you're parents or step parents, to share an idea about family. To me, goes back to Susanna. Your family is your family. You might have great relations with them or not. I have a great brother, but we're not really close. He's an amazing person, but we have different lives. That's how it is. But I think you can judge a lot by a woman or a man, whoever, by the friends they have. Not the multitudes, not the numbers, but the intensity of friendships. One or two intense, real, caring friendships. And I saw that with Susanna, that she had a number of really deep friendships. And I like that about her, because it indicated a depth of her and a soul and an openness, which is not always common. Now, there was a bonus for me that I found out later, which is she has 2 wonderful sisters. I'm crazy about them and her parents and her nephews, and she has cousins who are fantastic. And she had, at the time when she was alive, an aunt who was just marvelous. So that was a bonus. But the friendship thing was so important to me. I can't tell you how many women I went out with who would tell me by the second date or the second conversation they were having a friend fight with so-and-so or whatever. It happens to the best of us, but the depth of a friendship or 2 or 3 reveals a lot about people.
Right. Yes, that's so true. Yeah, I think meeting a potential partner's friends is really important. Maybe not until like the 4th or 5th date or something, but I think it does tell you something about the person for sure. And also vice versa. I think it's important for your friends to see how you interact with your potential, new partner and see how comfortable you are with them. And if you act like a different person, that might not be the right match for you. And I think it's
So
important for your
important.
friends
Yeah.
to
You have
tell
to
you
be a
that.
genuine
Yeah.
self in every situation. And, I can tell you as somebody who I love my friends, and I have told a couple of friends over the years, I was not excited about the people they were dating. And that came back to haunt me. People don't always want to know that, but
Yes,
ultimately, I will tell
it's
you, these
true.
relationships did not
Yeah.
work out. Years later, they did not work out.
Right.
Your friends who really care about you are very sensitive to that. But when you ask for an honest opinion, you better be ready
Yes,
to hear an honest opinion,
exactly.
which
Yeah.
isn't
If someone
easy. I've
asks
had that
you,
from several people.
yeah.
Somebody warned me against the woman I married, I didn't listen, and it ended up, this is the marriage that ended years ago. It ended up in not a happy situation, and I couldn't talk about who was wrong and who was right, but my friends and my family warned me that this person was not the same ideals,
Right.
not the same
Right.
values as I had.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the question is whether you choose to listen to the people around you telling you that. But yeah, it's important. I think that's a really good point. So, and then one other thing we talked about is how your dating profile sort of evolved over the years. So you said you were online dating probably about 3 years. Is that right?
I mean, it seemed like decades, but we're all in COVID
Yeah.
time, so
I knew
time
you
hasn't
kind of
moved,
did
but
some and then you took a break and then you did some so
yeah,
I know it's
it
like
was on
broken
and
up,
off for
but
years. Yeah, it was on and off
yeah.
for, yeah, but anyway, but I just want to mention one more thing, which is this is
Mhm.
really something I saw belatedly and something I'm guilty of. So I will tell you, when you're out on that first date, for me, it's 25 minutes, but whatever it is, the way the person treats the waiter, the host
Yes.
of the restaurant,
Yes.
whoever's coming in and filling glasses, assuming anybody's working these days, that's really important to me. And
Very,
I
very,
can't tell
very.
you how many times I went on a date with a woman who was dismissive. Now I'll tend to be hyper focused on somebody, and I won't, and I really now make an effort to realize that people are working around me to hold doors and do things that I don't always do.
Mhm.
My daughter, who's in college, is good to remind me that I need to be better at those social graces, and I do need to be. But I really make an effort to now, and I can't
Mhm.
tell you how many times I was on dates where women were dismissive of people who were filling up the water
Great stuff.
glasses, or who
Yeah.
were sending food back. It's not the fault of the waiter. If you don't like your food, you can do it courteously.
Right.
Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
so
Yeah.
that's important. But sorry, I just want to mention that because I do think that's a really, really important indicator. If
Yeah.
women are listening, they should know that, because it's not
Right.
just men who are rude. Frankly, women
Exactly.
are men tend
And
to be.
I think that that's living in New York City, and you surrounding areas like you. I think it is something that you can sort of dismiss as like, oh, they're just like a jaded New Yorker and they're just whatever, abrupt or something like that. But I think, I mean, being polite is still a thing. I mean, I that always really bothered me too. And I've been in New York for 22 years now. So, I consider myself pretty much, a New Yorker. But I still take the time to thank people and actually mean it. And I think there's so many people that don't do that and don't even think about it if somebody didn't do that. Like they would give it a pass, I guess is my point. And I don't think that's necessarily, I don't think it should get a pass. So I'm with you on that 100%.
Well, I was born and raised in New York, so I actually have an excuse.
You
I'm
really are a
immune,
New Yorker.
I'm immune from criticism, but I lived in Latin
Yeah.
America for 10 years, and I did see that people are nicer. I lived in Texas and Florida. Yeah, that's really an indication to me. In fact, that kind of thing, those little things to me were actually often deal killers. Somebody who's rude or hostile, or talked, about her ex the first time, or all those little things that seem tiny and insignificant, to me are very potent symbolically.
Right. Yes, I agree. I really agree with that. Um, so, well, just really quickly, and I know
I,
you have to go, but
yeah,
I just,
no,
I
I
would
forgot to ask you. You forgot to get into your question about the
Yeah.
profile.
Well, I just really, because I really like, you sent me your most recent profile, which obviously you've been with Susanna for a while, and it was really good. And I'm sure it took you a while to kind of get to that point, of knowing what to say and how to say it. And did you find that, and I know you're a journalist, so it's probably somewhat easier for you, but did you find that when you were first starting out, you didn't really know what to say and know what to write, and then you sort of just, it went from there? And then did you find like a noticeable change in people that were interested when you got, for example, more humorous or more detailed or something like that?
So interesting you ask that, because I remember with horror, my first attempts at, my first go around at dating, I was in my 20s, I was living overseas. It was who you met and who your friends introduced you to. It was before online dating. I'll date myself by saying that, but I will tell you that my first attempts at writings were novels. They were terrible, turgid,
Mhm.
just inane prose and on and on. So every rule I just told you, I violated. I wrote too much. I was humor. I was
Right.
supposed to be, and the quality woman who responded was, they were looking for somebody I wasn't, somebody wealthy and somebody with, with the summer house and all that. But then I had this epiphany because I was talking to woman friends of mine about what they saw, what they looked, and that I had them actually go on. I didn't want to stalk guys' profiles, but I had a couple of women friends over the years show me guys' profiles that they had seen, and I realized that most of them are horrendous. They're
Yeah.
boasting, they're long, they're misspellings, they're grammatical mistakes, there's no kind of evidence that they're sensitive or caring or listening. I mean, a profile says a lot about you. And I realized there's an old book by a writer I love named Norman Mailer, and it's called Advertisements for Myself. It's a bunch of essays. Your profile is an advertisement for yourself, or to change metaphors. To change metaphors, your profile is the door of your house or your apartment. If it's too showy, if it's too falling apart, nobody wants to go inside. So the advertisement is that I mean the profile is that advertisement, that little thing. So I cut hundreds of words out. I split into sections. Like I had one sort of intro section, one section about kind of where I lived, one section about who I am as a person and what values I have. And then a family section said, I'm a divorced dad with rambunctious, fun-loving children. We do this and this and that. And it just was, it signals, if you're a woman who's looking for somebody who doesn't have young children, go no further. I'm the wrong person for you. And I thought that was honest to say that, because I do like being an involved dad. And then I also mentioned that I've been a journalist for years and so forth. I said, I dislike cookie cutter suburbs. Anyway, like little things like that. To me, I'm looking at it, just said a lot. And here's me. I said, real friendships, real conversations, real sincere. But then I went on to actual specifics. That I had been a journalist, but I took some time off to be a high school teacher. Just really short, like a few details go a little way. You don't want to know everything. Then there's no reason to go on a date. You've already dated a person by reading a profile.
Right. No, that's one of the points I bring up about writing your bio. Like, don't write too much, because you want to leave something to actually talk about on your dates and tell them about yourself. So no, yours was really, really great. I think a lot of men would really benefit from reading your profile and listening to your advice, really, truly. And that's how you ended up with a great partner. So major success story.
I'm very lucky. Susanna is wonderful, and I still remember her profile was similar, and then hers is more gushy, more genuine, and more like mine was a little bit silly, funny, maybe, but hers is very Susanna. She's just So I'm lucky. And look, the worst thing for me now, I'll tell you, is to rush into a relationship because you miss having a companion. Because in my case, I had kids, but I wanted more kids. Now that's not a great reason. I have made mistakes in dating, and the thing to do is just slow down, and it's like fine wine. It takes a little while, it takes, like, to me, it's like you go on that first date, great. You have some conversation on the text. Second date, meet some friends at some point, meet some relatives at some point. Eventually, if you have kids or she has kids, meet the kids. But it has to evolve slowly, because there's certain times when you just realize that you're compatible. If you go away for a weekend, you go away for a day, you go away for a day trip, and you can't agree on what time to start or who's on time or what to bring. Like those are kind of
Yeah,
things. They're
yeah.
not serial killers, but I'm telling you, they're indications that something's
Indication.
awry.
Yeah,
With
exactly.
Suzanne, I did take it, we took it slowly because I have 3 kids. She had 1 kid. We had to, a lot
Mhm.
for us was protecting our kids from the wrong thing. And then ultimately, I met her son. She met my kids. Long story short, for people who've gone through this crazy dating process, you're going to hear a lot of stories. You can learn a lot. You're going to find some
Mhm.
things about yourself you don't like. Let's be honest about it,
Mhm.
and hopefully change them. And then I think you meet the right person, and I did with her. And bonus again, not only do I think her family is wonderful, but our 4 kids get along great.
That's amazing. That's huge. Yeah, that's really huge.
And I
Um,
told her if they didn't, that would be a problem. I
right.
don't want that
Yeah.
for my kids. I don't want, it's so hard anyway to be the right kind of parent, be the right kind of partner. And if you have, your kids are your kids, you can't change them. And sometimes they just don't get
Mhm.
along with someone else's
Mhm.
kid. And if you're really
Yeah.
truly going to merge families and be a family, that's difficult. Now, if they're 20 years old and they're out of the house, it's not as big a deal. But when you have
Right.
some or all in the house and you really want to do it right, to me, and I told her that would be a deal killer ultimately. If our kids didn't get along, her son didn't get along with me, if our kids didn't have to be best buddies, but they had to gel, and they
Yeah.
more than gel,
Yeah.
they're adorable together. You've seen
Right.
the photos.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. Well, thank you for all of your advice and tips. Hopefully people got something out of this. And it's really great to hear, the male perspective, because I think you hear so many women talking about online dating and not enough men.
Next
So,
time you can interview the woman who dated me, you can hear how terrible I am, but I'm more the same
right,
time, maybe, I'm sure. I don't,
right.
I don't tend to be
I
perfect.
went out with this one guy who gave us a 25-minute limit.
I think that's actually kind of famous at 25 now, and it's probably like, it's out there in Twitter land, or woman making fun of me for it, but
Right, right.
I really seriously, I did think it was a way to show respect for people's time.
Yeah, yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, it wasn't just about you, it was about, both parties. So, well, thank you so much. This is great. And maybe we'll have you back on at some point to tell us, to give us more advice.
I will say to your listeners, your viewers, you're doing really important work, and I admire you. I think it's one of the things I wish somebody told me when I was younger meaning in my teens and 20s, is that a good, solid, caring, equal relationship. A relationship is not based on money, but it's based on values. It's based on feelings, on emotions, on
Mhm.
helping each other is
Mhm.
one of the most important things in life, if not the most important thing.
Yes, agreed, agreed. Great advice. Thank you so much. And we'll see you soon.
All right, thanks so much, Alyssa.
Thank you. Okay.